we are beginning to appreciate that the microbiome goes beyond just pooping and gut health, right? It is a powerhouse for metabolic health, immune health, even, cognition and neuroprotective effects as well. There's a bunch of studies showing very strong associations between groups that have higher fiber consumption and lower risk and lower incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's. If you're consistently eating fiber, from going from a fiber naive diet and chronically low fiber, and you start slowly increasing your fiber intake, over several weeks and months, you will start noticing more energy, more alertness, less fatigue, and it really does impact your brain, emotion, and cognition as well, not just gut health.
Welcome back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast, where we explore the science of feeling your best, one system at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Carrasco, and today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and overlooked systems of the body, the gut microbiome. Our guest today is Dr. Karan Rajan, an NHS surgeon, university lecturer, and one of social media's most trusted medical voices with over 1.6 million followers. He's known for breaking down complex medical science into practical, myth-free insights that empower people to take charge of their health. Dr. Karan, you've become one of the most trusted voices on social media about health, and I'd love for our audience to learn more about how you got to where you are, kind of your journey, and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
Yeah, so thank you for having me, Alex. I actually have been doing this for quite a while, almost 15 years. I started on YouTube in 2010. So back when it was weird to record videos and put them online, but now it's weird if you don't make videos and put them online. So times have changed. And honestly, at the time, there weren't a lot of people doing medical education online in 2010. It was the bad old days of YouTube and social media in general. And I had done these exams in medical school, and I realized if I wanted to teach more people how to do those exams, it would be useful to have like a video tutorial. And so me and a couple of friends, we decided to put some videos out there on YouTube as like a tutorial, how to do an abdominal examination, how to do suture, how to do blood pressure reading. And it got like a mini cult following within our university, other universities in the UK. And then I was getting messages from Ghana, Sweden, Australia, the US.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, the YouTube platform and online in general is a great medium for spreading the message globally.
Right.
And it took a long time to create content, but I just loved education and loved the ability to reach people independent of time or geography.
Right. So initially you were educating med students on what you were learning in your curriculum. That would have been so helpful when I was a med student, but YouTube didn't exist really at that time. If it did, it was just in its infancy. But and then you kind of spread more into general education, just educating the general public about health topics.
Yeah, I sort of realized that the bigger market and bigger need, I should say, is the lay population. Because educating healthcare professionals or budding healthcare professionals is great. But, there was a lot of misinformation rising over the years that I just saw in general. And then it sort of reached its zenith in 2019, 2020, just like around the sort of COVID time. And that's when I really got involved in a big way on TikTok. And then that obviously helped, right time, right place, right person, doing the, saying the right things. And it took off, and I found like a strategy that worked for me online that resonated with people. People became interested in science and, talking about subjects that hit certain pain points with people as well, whether it was like how to improve sleep, how to improve like your bowel habits. All that was like resonated with the average person. I was like, this is what I want to do.
So how did you go from physician, surgeon to now kind of being at the forefront of microbiome medicine?
Yeah, it's been full circle for me because the word microbiome barely existed in our lexicon 20 years ago, and now it's everywhere. We've seen microbiome washing of everything. As a GI surgeon, I've always been interested in gut health, both professionally as my day job, but also personally as well, because I've had my own gut health issues. 1 in 5 people experience some gut health problem in their lifetime. And I've always been fascinated by it, and especially the microbiome. And I've done a lot of personal research into it over the last few years. I wasn't taught anything about the microbiome in med school.
Me either.
Yeah, I don't think many people are. And so everything I know about the microbiome is learning from people smarter than me and just doing a lot of like self-teaching.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating space. And I saw problems in the microbiome space where the rigorous science wasn't being applied to consumer products.
Right.
And I wanted to create something that I wish I had. Over the years, I've taken fiber supplements, I've taken prebiotic supplements, and I saw issues with them. If a product had one thing, it was lacking in another. Same goes for the dozens of products I've tried. And I thought, how can I apply real rigor to it, apply my own expertise and clinical experience and microbiome knowledge and real research that we have to create something that can actually help people and make it accessible on a mass scale.
Right.
And it's been difficult because also what I wasn't taught as a doctor or as a person in my life was business.
Right.
You know, I don't think the average doctor is a good business person.
Absolutely
So
not.
it's been a huge learning curve for me to figure that out as well. Because, hey, I got the science down, but I know nothing about business. I'm like a baby learning how to crawl.
Right. Yeah, I think it can be very tricky. You know, when you're a clinician and you're learning things that maybe are outside of traditional medical education. So that takes a huge effort. And then when you want to solve a problem, but you have to do that through a business platform, because that's probably the only way that we can do that. That's another huge education. It's a huge mountain to move.
Yeah, there's so many intricacies to it because, you know, you've got to navigate the research side of things, but also to make a successful product, it needs to make sense in terms of the profits and losses, and the whole unit economics of the business need to make sense to survive. Otherwise, a great idea just dies and never sees the light of day. And then the market continues to be dominated by cheap products that make a lot of money for the actual businesses, but then it doesn't help people. Like, you know, I personally am not a big fan of, you know, all of these better for you products which claim to have higher protein, higher fiber, because ultimately the ingredients are cheap commodity products which aren't the best for your health, but give the illusion of health.
So tell us a little bit more about what you've developed in Loam and how that came about, because to me, it seems like it's prebiotic fiber supporting the microbiome. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how it helps your gut.
Yeah, so I wanted to create something based on first principles. And the first principles is that humans need fiber, not because we can digest fiber, but because our bacteria have the enzymes to digest fiber. They ferment fiber and produce compounds like butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid, and other beneficial compounds. So it nourishes our inner ecosystem. Right. The problem is that most of the bacteria, you know, that most of the bacterial species that live inside us are residing in the end of the colon, in the distal colon. Right. You've got the proximal colon, which is the first part on the right-hand side, and then it goes to the transverse colon, which is in the middle and the top, and then you've got the distal colon on the left-hand side, just before it goes to the rectum and then the anus. And the biggest abundance of the microbiome lives in the distal colon. Most of the stuff that we eat day to day, like if you think apples, oranges, cucumbers, whatever, all of those are great sources of prebiotics and fibers. And even some of the prebiotic fiber supplements which exist do a pretty okay job at feeding the proximal colon, the first part, and maybe the transverse colon. Right. But it doesn't feed most of the bacteria living in the distal colon. Right. Because you need slow fermenting fibers to get right to the end. And if you're not feeding the guys at the end of the queue, you're missing out on the beneficial compounds they can produce. So actually you need fibers and a mix of fibers, both either in supplements or in the food you eat, that can reach the end of the colon and nourish those as well. Not just the, you know, bugs at the front of the queue. So we are starving part of our microbiome, both in our daily diets and in the supplements that we have available. So I wanted to create something which hits every gear of the microbiome. It's a mix of fast fermenting fibers, medium fermenting fibers, and slow fermenting fibers. So you get a full range of short chain fatty acid production, the full rainbow, and you feed all aspects of the microbiome. Because if you feed different bugs, you get different benefits. Right. And also there's a lot of cross-feeding as well. So if you feed one bacteria a certain type of food, it produces a byproduct, and that byproduct could feed another type of bacteria. Right. So there's lots of very interesting science, which a lot of companies that formulate products don't appreciate or just don't have the knowledge to do.
Right.
And even when it comes back to the food that we eat, if you look back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and even actually a couple of hundred years ago, people used to eat more root vegetables, which is harder to digest and actually reaches the distal colon. Yeah. Things like cassava, carrots, things like that. You need stuff which goes to the end. Yeah. So on a practical level, that's something that someone can take away. But also this is why I built Loam, to be the closest thing to replicate diversity in diet, and also scientifically actually works on first principles.
That's so interesting. I talk about this often, but I have my mother's side of my family came from Cuba. And so they eat a lot of tubers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of longevity. My grandmother lived to 103 years old.
Wow.
And in Miami, after they came to the United States after the Cuban Revolution, she volunteered at this senior center. And they were probably the most vibrant 95 plus people I have ever seen in my life, dancing and singing, like at their little senior center every day. And I always wondered, I remember being in medical school and maybe even right after, while I was learning more about the gut and functional medicine, thinking, I would love to do a stool sample on these people, because what is it that allows them to live such long lives? But they do have a very consistent diet of tubers. So they eat cassava, they eat something called malanga, they eat some sweet potato variations and rice and beans. And so I think that they're eating that every single day. So they're probably, I imagine that they probably have a very interesting and healthy microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to your point, even if you look at some subsistence populations or non-industrial populations across the world, and you've got a bunch of these cohorts across the world. You've got some in South India. The most popular one would be the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. And in these tribes, you see a high microbial diversity, and they've got bacterial species which don't exist in the Western world now. And they've also got some of the lowest chronic disease burdens across any population, like, low incidence of cancer, metabolic disease, etc. And sure, there's a lot of other lifestyle factors that
they probably move a lot more.
Yeah, they move a lot. Like
they see the sunshine a lot more.
Exactly. They sleep well, low levels of stress, like compared to like city dwellers, etc. But also in their diet, they're eating over 100 grams of fiber a day.
Wow.
Not only that, but they're also eating seasonally, which means they're rotating the foods and plants that they eat. Right. So diversity, but also they are eating a lot of that kind of tuberous root vegetables, which are bitter, difficult to digest, difficult to eat, like the sort of cassava, plantain, and things like that, which aren't typically found in the average diet in the Western world.
Definitely not. So what are your thoughts? So tell us a little bit more about the different types of fiber. So for our listeners, we have a lot of clinicians. We also have some health warriors. So for someone that's trying to feed themselves in this way, what would you recommend? How do you get that diversity?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say if you ask someone to name 3 high fiber foods versus 3 high protein foods, it would struggle with the fiber. Yeah. So the first thing is actually understanding, what types of foods have fiber. And, you can think about, you can break them down to different buckets. So like, the kind of like best food group for fiber is beans. Yeah. Right. That's like found in virtually every population that is healthy, associated with longevity. They will likely have a high consumption of beans. Yeah. And then you've got like berries as a whole. Right. Again, another fiber packed food, also has polyphenols and low calorie. So you can't really overdose on berries. Right. Then you've got like nuts and seeds, another big bracket, and people don't really appreciate the value you get from these. Protein content as well, omega-3. And actually omega-3s act as prebiotics as well. So they're good for your guts, and you need them as well. Even the stuff you get from fish, the omega-3s you get. So beans, berries, nuts and seeds. Then you've got your whole grains as well, like your quinoa, barley, rice. And then you've got obviously things like potatoes and other starchy compounds. So actually having an understanding, the lay of the land of what fiber foods actually are helps.
Yeah.
But if someone was trying to like fiber max, you can't go wrong with berries, beans, and seeds.
Okay.
Right? So like your staples could be something like in your kitchen pantry, if you really wanted to make sure an easy way to hit your fiber target daily, have some chia seeds and flax seeds and basil seeds just like in your pantry. Have some blueberries and raspberries just in your fridge or freezer.
Yeah.
And frozen is fine. It's the same nutritional content.
Right.
And sometimes even more nutritional content than the fresh stuff.
Right. And it doesn't mold as fast.
Exactly. And then just having like a stock of oats,
Yeah.
you know, protein and fiber in that. And, you know, just a ton of potatoes. And you can amplify the, fiber content of potatoes or resistant starch content of potatoes by actually putting them in the fridge or freezer. That, you know, allows retrogradation of the starch to actually be more beneficial for your gut. So it's quite easy once you have an idea of, you know, what is fiber and just consistently stock them in your pantry.
Yeah. And I think white rice is another food that while it maybe isn't that fibrous, it can give you a resistant starch.
Yeah. You know, it's very common in my culture. Like, you know, I'm come from an Indian background.
Yeah.
In South India, we actually, one of the ingredients for certain dishes is actually using day-old rice. You know, there's nothing, I think people think that day-old rice is going to give you food poisoning, you know, but it's not. It depends how you store it and how you reheat it afterwards, right? And that day-old rice has a higher resistant starch content. So it's actually technically lower in calorie and higher in resistant starch.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So tell me a little bit about how when you have a healthy microbiome that can affect your brain health, because a lot of people are now dealing with brain fog. That's something that we see a lot in our patient populations, fatigue. So tell us how manipulating and supporting our microbiome can help with those issues.
Yeah, so we are beginning to appreciate that the microbiome goes beyond just pooping and gut health, right? It is a powerhouse for metabolic health, immune health, even, you know, cognition and neuroprotective effects as well. There's a bunch of studies showing very strong associations between groups that have higher fiber consumption and lower risk and lower incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's, right? So there's loads of associations from a neurological point of view there. But also, you know, one of the biggest connections between the brain and the gut is obviously the vagus nerve. And what happens is that a lot of compounds that our microbiome produces do end up being neurotransmitters, which can either stimulate the vagus nerve to send signals up to the control center in the brain and, you know, influence the mood and emotions. But also some of those neurotransmitters directly impact the brain as well. And, you know, one of the interesting things about fiber, there's growing evidence for fiber and prebiotics' role in sleep regulation as well because of that gut-brain connection. And also you'll find if you're consistently eating fiber, from going from a fiber naive diet and chronically low fiber, and you start slowly increasing your fiber intake, over several weeks and months, you will start noticing more energy, more alertness, less fatigue, less of that groggy feeling. And it really does impact your brain, emotion, and cognition as well, not just gut health.
I think that a lot of people are fiber naive. I think that there are absolutely times when therapeutic diets can help, like ketogenic diets, sometimes even carnivore diets, you know, when people have very, you know, different autoimmune diseases or sometimes GI distress. But I don't think that those are necessarily good for the long term. So how would you tell someone that has been maybe playing in the low carb, in the low fiber space for several years, and they're just coming into wanting to add more fiber in, because it can make you bloat, it can make you feel, you know, kind of bad initially. So how do you ramp that up in a way where where you're not afraid to consume fiber, or where you take it and you say, oh, this isn't for me, I need to just stay in my kind of low carb, high protein diet?
So the sort of pipeline for someone to go from normal diet to carnivore keto, it's rooted in gut physiology and things going wrong. That's usually the case, where it's actually a systemic issue. So, John Smith starts eating fiber and he gets cramps and bloating.
Right.
And then he says, fiber's not for me, goes low carb, cuts it out, maybe goes carnivore, so high protein diet. So, he's got some energy. Now he's not having fiber and the bloating disappears.
Right.
So he leans in on the carnivore and keto.
That's right.
And that is not a sign that you don't need fiber. That is a sign that there is a systemic issue in your GI physiology. You sometimes need to go through a little bit of discomfort to get through it, because your microbes need to adjust and adapt and acclimatize to the fiber load that you're doing. So you always got to start low and slow with fiber. You ramp up slowly by a few grams a week. But also, it depends on the type of fibers you consume, how soluble they are, how they ferment, insoluble versus soluble. Are they low FODMAP friendly? Because all our guts are different. They may be very sensitive. So would John Smith benefit from fiber long term? Would most humans? Yes.
Right.
Has John Smith been overdoing the fiber, which then has led to these symptoms? Maybe.
Right.
Could John Smith start introducing fibers slowly, both diversity and low FODMAP types, which are gentle, to as an entry point in, and then increase that over time? Yes, because chronically depriving your gut of fiber switches your bacteria from saccharolytic, which is fermenting fiber, which is what they do as, baseline inherently. It switches them to go into this kind of like weird hibernation mode where, okay, we don't have any fiber anymore. We've got to start digesting protein as a fuel source, which is proteolytic fermentation.
Right.
And guess what's protein rich inside the human body? Your gut
tissue.
lining.
So then you see that endotoxin go up and that LPS go up.
Exactly. You get leaky gut symptoms, and long term, that is what the carnivore diet will do.
Yeah. I know it's controversial, I think, to a lot of people, but it's true. So tell me your perspective on SIBO.
So I think SIBO is obviously a real condition, but I think sometimes it sort of can be labeled the new IBS in that it's an easy thing to overdiagnose, but also underdiagnose at the same time, which sounds weird because it is difficult to diagnose.
It is,
But also I feel it's being used as like a catch-all diagnosis. Like, we can't really figure out what's going on. You have IBS or SIBO or something like that, like some functional gut disorder.
Yeah.
And actually, we need better tests. We need better understanding of SIBO so someone can actually say, hey, this is actually SIBO and this is what you can do. And unfortunately, a lot of the treatments for SIBO, antibiotics, could worsen your gut health and could worsen whatever you've got. So we need to be very careful labeling someone with a condition that might require antibiotics, because that is very detrimental to your gut physiology and the microbiota. And so what I would say with someone who doesn't, know what they've got wrong with their guts, it really needs like a holistic approach. And you can't just involve one practitioner. You might start with one person, going to one person, but that person should involve an entire multidisciplinary team to look into what's going on, whether it's like a dietitian, a nutritionist, sometimes a psychologist, to look in the connection between the gut and the brain. And from like a, neurogastroenterology point of view, maybe there's a gut surgeon that needs to be involved, a gastroenterologist. So there's like a lot of stakeholders that need to be involved sometimes to come up with a diagnosis as to what's going on.
Yeah. Do you think that there's ever an issue with a ileocecal valve where, bacteria can just populate the small intestine over and over and over again?
Yeah. I mean, there could be issues. Like, for example, with ulcerative colitis and, like Crohn's and some of these inflammatory bowel disease, you get some backwash of some of the bacteria, and sometimes we refer to it as backwash ileitis. We can get some bacteria from the colon spilling over into the small intestine. Does that contribute to sort of SIBO type symptoms? Maybe. If someone has got motility issues in their guts, and actually the food is spending too long in the small intestine and there's the degree of stagnation and fermentation going on there, and some of the bacteria translocate and migrate, maybe. There's a lot of people now, especially who've had weight loss surgery, right? And essentially with bariatric surgery, your intestines are rearranged. Your anatomy is new. And so when you chop bits of intestine and replumb them to other bits, you could get bacteria migrating from one place where they typically live to somewhere else. Can that contribute to that as well? And generally low fiber diets, again, causing that kind of like slow transit through the guts.
That's what I was going to ask you next.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people to increase their gut motility from fiber?
Fiber is one thing, and definitely helps with GI motility, but also just general movement as well. You're providing that external muscular contraction for your gut to just move. And there is also, I think, something to be said about stress regulation and that as well, because stress paradoxically can contribute to both constipation and diarrhea. So stress is a very underrated wrecker of gut health as well. Chronic stress, the sort of, intestinal hyperpermeability you might get from that as well, and all the sort of, unseen negative consequences from that. So there's a lot of factors that have a role to play in motility. But yeah, fiber, movement are two important things to consider.
And what are your favorite ways to support stress response and nervous system regulation?
It's difficult for everyone to be like, hey, you just got to be less stressed. For me, one thing, because, my time is so limited nowadays, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I do breath work and I do meditation, I do yoga.
You do an hour of that every day?
Yeah, I don't do any of that. I've got a, like family, I've got a dog, I've got like a business, I've got social media, I've got so many things going on that is difficult. One thing I do religiously every day is I try and walk loads. And for me, that's a combination of both my movement and stress regulation. I just go out with my dog for a very, very long walk. And I've got all that. And to be honest, like, if you look consistently across the data, one of the best de-stressing activities you can do is actually just spending time with loved ones and people that fill your cup. And for me, that's like my parents, my wife, my dog. That's enough for me. That's my entire world. So the more time I can spend with them, and if I can combine that with walking, and it happens that my wife also loves walking, and my dog insists I take him out on walks. So that's like the perfect storm.
And your dog is good for your microbiome.
Yeah, you know what? It is. Like, you share the microbiome of people that you hang around with, right? Your like partners, your family members, even your pets as well. And I wouldn't say the data is high quality in adults, but certainly in children, we have data suggesting that kids who grow up in farms or non-urban environments compared to city-dwelling kids have more robust, resilient microbiomes, which then results in lower chronic disease risks, autoimmune disease risk, and allergies.
Yeah, exactly. Less eczema.
Yeah, exactly.
Even just colds in general.
Exactly, because it's, less pollution. They're in nature and fresh air, maybe animals on a farm, pets.
Their immune system can figure some things out since they're not in a very sterile environment.
Exactly. Their immune systems are better trained to tell foe versus friend, and they don't hyperactivate with like simple allergens like pollen or peanuts.
Do you have a perspective on urolithin A? Because that's become a very popular, very popular nutrient.
I would say that the hype about urolithin A and the research seems to come down to one specific company, right? So I probably won't comment on this too much, in that I think we need more convincing data about the use of postbiotics. Certainly mechanistically, I understand it, and I'm excited by the possibility of postbiotics, and I think it is a growing area of research. Urolithin A specifically, I think I always bring it back to, if you think about the sort of spectrum and sort of full gamut of what's out there for sort of gut is prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, right? And the probiotics, we already have probiotics and living organisms inside us.
Right.
They produce postbiotics. We consume prebiotics in either diet or supplements. So if you want to get more nourishment of the pro, and if you want to get more post, start with the pre.
Start with the pre.
Like that's the first step of the line. That's the factory line. That's the ingredients for both the pro and the post. And again, it comes back to dietary diversity. If you get enough dietary diversity, and specifically for like urolithin A, elegotannins, if you find in pomegranates or in raspberries or like darkly red colored things, that is the fuel source.
There's your polyphenol.
That's your polyphenols to produce those postbiotics like urolithin A. That's my take anyway.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to really just feed the biome. I mean, that's kind of seems to be the hack, right?
I think of your gut as a garden.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And the hype around probiotics seems to be like, you've got a nice garden with some flowers, and if you keep buying flowers, that's the equivalent of taking these probiotics, right? But actually, would you be better served taking care of the plants and the flowers you've got already and enriching the soil?
Absolutely.
Right? And just nourish that soil so the existing plants, the existing bugs can flourish and grow. Because that's all you need. You've got an ecosystem, just feed it.
Right. That's wonderful. I think that's really, really good advice. So tell us a little bit more specifically about your product Loam.
So Loam took a long time to research and develop, like a 2-year timeline for R&D, purely because I wanted to make sure I got it right. And interestingly, we not only looked through thousands of research papers, but we built a proprietary tech platform to actually help us come up with a matrix of fibers that would work well together. Wow. Because what a lot of people don't know is that fibers and prebiotics aren't just inert substances. They interact with each other as well as the microbiome as well. So prebiotic A plus prebiotic B produces a different result than if you combine prebiotic C to prebiotic A.
Right.
They mix together and they work synergistically. So it's like a 1 + 1 = 3 phenomenon.
Yeah.
They work synergistically to provide even more benefits. So there are literally thousands of prebiotic fibers that are in existence in the world. We've, as humans, managed to unlock some of them that we can sell and produce as ingredients.
So is that kind of like inulin or chicory or things like that?
Inulin and fructooligosaccharides and things like that. And I'll come on to explain why I don't think they're great. But essentially, all of these different fibers interact in different ways.
Okay.
And moving beyond the soluble versus insoluble phenomenon, in my opinion, what is like the ultimate prebiotic fiber is what I wanted to make.
Right.
The ultimate stack, which I believe would be the best available in the market right now, scientifically and from a user experience. I wanted all these things: user experience, science, clinically backed, and just something that actually works mechanistically and clinically.
Right.
So I want something that's very highly soluble, which can dissolve easily, doesn't have the mouthfeel, and isn't viscous.
Yeah.
Things like psyllium husk, Metamucil, very thick, gloopy, and viscous. Like it just tastes like frog spawn, difficult to make into a habit, right? And then you want something which is high in fermentation. Again, most of the things out there at the moment, including the psyllium husk, they don't ferment well. They have low prebiotic activity.
Right.
So I want something with high prebiotic activity. And then you want something which is not very viscous. So that fits with the solubility. To my point before, something which hits all areas of the microbiome. Slow fermenters, fast fermenters, medium fermenters. Something which is unflavored, you can use with anything: your coffee, your smoothie, your yogurt.
Yeah.
So something which does all of that. And then ultimately something which is clinically backed as well.
Yeah.
So the point of inulin, for example. Inulin is a fast fermenting fiber which ferments in the proximal or the early colon and causes gas and bloating because it rapidly ferments. And again, I can't say with any certainty that this is true, but mechanistically, my theory is that things like inulin, which ferment very rapidly and fast, could then affect, and does it potentially increase the risk of things like SIBO?
Right, that's interesting.
Because it's in the early part of the colon, and is it going there and providing gas and enrichment to bacteria there? I don't know. But this is why I didn't want to use things like inulin or fructooligosaccharides. Because if someone has a gut health problem and they're reaching for a prebiotic fiber supplement, inulin is going to make the problem worse, which is why I also don't like these healthy for you sodas. So, you know, this tech platform we created helped us find and augment the perfect formulation, which mixes all those things, which hits every part of the microbiome, replicates dietary diversity. And I can tell you on this podcast, this will be probably the first podcast I've revealed it in, we have 6 different prebiotic fibers within loam.
Wow.
And why 6? It's the perfect sweet spot because if you go too low in terms of the number of fibers you don't have enough diversity and you can't replicate a diverse diet. If you go too high, what happens is one of 2 things. I've seen prebiotics out there which claim to have 18 different prebiotics. You cannot have the clinically dosed effect, like therapeutic dose of each individual fiber, or if you do, the overall dose is too high. And there's too much diversity there. And actually what will happen is the tolerability won't be good. It'll be either viscous or very poorly soluble because you're using all these fibers which probably don't mix together well. You know, it's like you need to find fibers which synergize, have good science, and have good profiles individually. So honestly, I believe these 6 that we've chosen blend together so well. And I believe and the trials that we're doing at the moment will show that it's going to be one of the most efficacious and highly super stacked prebiotic mix that you can find.
That's really exciting.
And the key thing as well, when you add it, it dissolves crystal clear.
Does it come in a powder?
Comes in a powder. If you have 10 ounces of water in a glass and you add loam to the glass, within 45 seconds, it will dissolve clear.
Wow.
So it will just look like water. It will just taste and feel like water.
Yeah.
So there's no friction to someone using it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel goopy.
And the problem I found with other prebiotics in the market, there are a lot of people having a serving size of 4 grams, 5 grams.
Yes.
One of the most popular prebiotics that's being sold right now has a serving size of 6 grams. My serving size is 12 grams.
Wow.
It gives 10 grams of dietary fiber and 12 grams of prebiotics. And a mix of 6 different fibers, which I'm basically priced lower than them as well.
Yeah.
Which makes it more accessible and affordable. And I don't understand having a serving size so low because that's not high fiber.
Do you feel like the goal is to get to 30 or 35, or how many grams of fiber do you?
Me personally, because I've done this slow building of my own diet over several years, I eat somewhere around 55 or 60 grams of fiber a day. And I wouldn't recommend someone jumps to that. But I think the baseline should be 30 grams of fiber a day. But the data that we've got from both these non-industrial populations who are eating way more than that, like triple, quadruple that, but also a lot of studies we have on fiber where if you look at the dose response curves, there continues to be benefits beyond 30 grams of fiber a day. So there is nothing, you don't have to stop at 30 grams of fiber a day. Don't feel that, hey, we need to stop.
Yeah.
Everyone's obsessing with protein and eating 200 grams of protein a day. You do get diminishing returns eating high protein. The data suggests that, about 1.6 grams of protein per kilo is the kind of optimal amount for muscle protein synthesis. You get diminishing returns after that. It's not really the same for fiber because we haven't studied it enough to see what's the upper limit.
Right.
And if you look at these subsistence populations eating 100 grams plus a day, that could be a target. We should raise the benchmark for fiber consumption.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the law of diminishing returns would really exist within that, within fiber. Yeah,
I'm not going to sit here and say that if you suddenly eat 60 or 100 grams, you're going to extrapolate. It's not linear.
Right.
There will be some drop off and some diminishing returns, but you're not going to get diminishing returns between 30 and 40.
Right.
You get diminishing returns between 30 and 100 eventually, or diminishing returns between 90 and 100 or 100 and 120.
Right.
But to get to that point, you need to work hard and work smart.
Time. Yeah, it's interesting. With your product, it sounds kind of like, you're saying six prebiotic fibers in one. And why not more? I think if you're mimicking diet, you probably wouldn't eat more than 6 in a day anyway. It'd be very hard to get.
It's difficult,
right? Like it'd be very hard to get more than that.
For the average person, if you think about the average person when they go like grocery shopping, most people are eating the same plants over and over again.
Yeah.
Apples, oranges, onions, cucumbers, lettuce.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, how different does someone go? Are you throwing in pistachios? Are you throwing in pomegranates?
Right.
Beetroots?
Right.
Like, there is some variety to be had. So actually, that's another thing. It's like, I'm trying to replicate diversity as much as I can. But also, like a take home for people should be that every once in a while, just pick a fruit or vegetable that looks weird.
Yeah.
And throw that in your diet.
Right.
Because, you try something new. Right? And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But also you're getting more diversity and different nutrients that come with that as well.
I think because food is so available to us, it becomes very easy to just eat the same meals every single day for years on end. And to your point, I mean, we're meant to eat seasonally. Obviously, that's how food grows. So we're definitely missing, that impact when we just choose like the same chicken and rice every day.
It's also a cooking thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I grew up in an Indian household. My mum's vegetarian, and Indian vegetarian food is some of the best in the world in terms of how they spice the vegetables.
Delicious.
I would say the average Western person wouldn't know what to do with an aubergine, an eggplant, right? Like, can you make a great eggplant curry?
Right.
That tastes good. It's a difficult thing to actually look at and cook. Like, how do I eat this?
Yeah.
Right? It's actually like one of the healthiest foods you can get. It's, rich in those polyphenols, in like fiber, in other micronutrients.
Mucilaginous.
Yeah. And it's like, how do I actually cook it? But actually it makes a really mean curry.
Yeah.
And it's that, I think that's also a barrier when you find these kind of like strange things like okra, right? Again, very common in Asian populations, but in the Western world, it's difficult to conceptually think about, how do I cook this? Like, not only seasoning it, but like, how do I prepare it?
Right.
So I think that is also a challenge and a barrier to a lot of people eating enough fiber, because these exotic, fruits and vegetables are confusing. Actually, how do I cut and prepare and eat it and consume it in my life, even if I want to?
Right. Well, I think that, there's interesting studies that show that people who maintain their traditional diets have better longevity. And I think that kind of in the Western world, there's not really a traditional diet anymore. I think it's just a lot of ultra processed food. I think we've lost a lot of our customs. A lot of the age-old wisdom is that should have been passed down, hasn't been passed down, or it's been overlooked. And so when we don't have a traditional cuisine, most of these traditional cuisines around the world have all of these staples within them. But I think that's something that's been lost. And then people are busy and they don't want to cook, and they just they don't have the time. So it's tough.
Yeah, I agree. And, growing up, I didn't really cook too much. And when I started medical school and I moved out the house, I was like, okay, I need to learn before I, leave the house. And so I got my mom to teach me how to make like dals and like lentil dishes and these like rice dishes. And that was a huge, valuable life lesson, not only so I could survive at uni and not just eat toast and beans, like baked beans, and like crisps and chips and things like that. But I actually, like going forwards now, I'm grateful because I know how to like prepare something that can nourish me, even if it's something like really quick. And, there's something, I shared a video recently. There's this Indian dish called like khichdi, which is, it uses rice, it uses white rice, and you just add a bunch of different lentils to it, right? And you throw it in your rice cooker, and you've now suddenly got a rice dish with a bunch of lentils. So it's high in protein and high in fiber. And even if you didn't want to add any seasoning to that, that's actually quite a tasty, simple dish on its own that you could prepare literally in like 15 or 20 minutes.
Wow.
And I think probably a really useful skill, apart from, everyone's trying to do all the right things now. Like eat more fiber, eat more protein, move, go to the gym, great. But another skill set I would add to that is learn the basics of cooking. Because again, what you put in your body, what you eat directly influences your microbiome. That's the biggest lever you have for your microbiome.
Absolutely. I think that is very true. And I think that there are, in my patient population, I see patients that are interested in cooking and that enjoy the art of it and it's a hobby. And then there's people that are like, I just don't want to do it,
Yeah.
and that's where it gets really hard. And then when you have a chronic illness and you're trying to get better and you don't know how to cook, that's probably not the time in your life that you want to learn because you feel terrible.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes to like cook, especially if you had a stressful day, like coming home and cooking.
Yeah.
And I've always said to myself, like, one day if I ever make enough money, the number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hire a chef, like a full-time chef.
That would be
just
amazing.
to like, who understands like macros, but also tasty foods. And I'm like, I can train him in the microbiome or whatever. And I can just say, hey, make me a microbiome-friendly, high-fiber, high-protein dish, which tastes amazing.
That is amazing. So I think that's another great idea.
That's a goal for me.
Okay, here's a question. For people that say haven't eaten beans in a long time, how do you cook them and prepare them so they don't get horrible gas? Because I think that's something that people worry about.
Yeah, I think if you pressure cook beans, like soak the beans and then pressure cook them, that actually reduces their FODMAP content significantly. And the FODMAP content is the stuff which can really provoke the gut and cause gut issues for someone who is like, fiber naive.
Yeah.
Because, you can train your guts. If you slowly introduce fiber over several weeks, your gut is beginning to be trained at being more efficient at handling the fiber load.
Right.
So I think some gas with beans is unavoidable unless like, you're a daily bean consumer. But yeah, I think it's just like understanding how like the cooking. So if you wash them and then throw away that water in which like you've soaked them and washed them and then pressure cook them, that's, an easy way to, like significantly reduce the FODMAP content.
It's funny because my mom will tell me about when she was growing up in Cuba in the 50s and they used pressure cookers for all their beans back then.
Yeah.
So I think
it's one of those like
people probably already knew
cultural things and like ancient things. Like it's very common in like South India, like to use pressure cooker when we make things as well. Yeah,
my mom would always say they'd be afraid that it would explode and go to the ceiling.
That is a risk.
Now with Instapot, it's better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Well, let me ask you this. So for any of our clinicians that are listening that want to learn more about the gut, that want to help patients heal their gut, we have obviously wonderful testing through Vibrant, which for me clinically is very useful. But if you're just starting to dip your toe in helping people maybe who are fiber naive or who definitely have gut inflammation and they're just doctors and these clinicians are just wanting to start helping their patients, what would you recommend to them clinically that they could do to help their patients?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things to get a read of what the patient's life is like. And this would be useful not only to improve them, but also understand like what is going on in their life, is keeping a food diary for like 2 weeks. And that food diary will give the clinician an idea as to, the fiber content daily that they're consuming, which is obviously a cornerstone of gut health, but also what kind of foods they're consuming. Is there enough diversity? Are they likely to be cooking this? Like, if the meals read like, I don't know, David protein bar for breakfast, or, this like packet of like chickpea snacks or crisps. They're not cooking any of that. They're buying things and consuming that, which is fine on occasion as a quick grab and go. But ultimately, we want to get to a point where most of the foods that we're consuming is either home cooked or, like minimally processed and whole foods. So I think a food diary, number one, is key, but also pairing that food diary with symptoms. So like ask your patient, after each meal to also track any symptoms they've been having. So that's like a good indication of, are there any food intolerances or any things or any types of food which is causing problems. And so I think that's like a very nice baseline. It's like an adjunct to the history that you might take with your patient. And it's visual and it just gives you like a real-time thing. And that's like one thing, but also getting the patient to like almost do like a poop diary as well over a couple of weeks. We produce poop, and that's like one of the best signals our body gives us to calibrate our health and understand like it's the sort of weather vane of our health, right? And we flush it away sometimes without even looking at it. So, maybe encourage the patients to look at it for a few weeks and eventually obviously daily. and also share that with you as well. Like,
Yeah.
what is it looking like daily? So you can sort of plot a sort of verbal visual
Right.
graph.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that a lot of people maybe are not as in touch with how many bowel movements they're having.
Yeah.
I think there are a few apps that you can use. I don't know if you know of any, but I know there's one called Happy Poop
All right.
that you can track when you have a bowel movement. You can say whether it's, Bristol 1 through 7.
Yeah.
And so then kind of what your diary is like, and if it's changing as you're changing your diet.
Yeah, so exactly that. And I think those two things, like the
Mm-hmm.
food diary and the poop diary, are two basic, easy, low-hanging fruits that you can try to go there. And, there's sort of other things like, looking at the medicines they take, because
Right.
there are a lot of medications we take nowadays, which are gut disruptors,
Right.
high use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories
Mm-hmm.
like, ibuprofen, things, antibiotics, only take antibiotics if you need them for a bacterial infection.
Right.
Limit the dose.
Right.
Make sure you take probiotics with that. That's
Right.
clinically studied for that. Alcohol, what's that like lifestyle looking like? Are they having a high alcohol
Mm-hmm.
consumption? There's also other this patient may chronically be on proton pump inhibitors. And we know that actually causes gut dysbiosis as well. Do they need them? Can you go down on the dose? Can you replace that with something else?
Right.
And so there's a lot of lifestyle changes from that point of view that you can just implement to just like almost on the first pass,
Right.
improve their gut health or improve the chances of improving their gut health.
Right. Without even having to go down the rabbit hole necessarily.
Yeah, without doing anything significant in terms of changes. Yeah,
Right.
just like cleaning up
Yeah.
their existing like food diary, their kind of pooping habits, and then like resolving some of their medications that they take.
I think that sometimes in your social you talk about how to have a great poop.
Mhm.
So you want to tell people how to have the best poop of their life.
Yeah, how to have the best poop of their life. Yeah, no pressure. But for me, I think there's something about like the anatomy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're actually kind of seated at the toilet,
Mm-hmm.
the Western toilet sometimes can be a little bit of a torture chamber for our
Right.
bowels and our guts. And it puts us in a slightly atypical position than what we evolved to do.
Right.
And if you think about how we evolved to poop, it was just like squatting in the field somewhere,
Right.
right? And what happens is when you squat,
Mm-hmm.
your puborectalis muscle, which is one of the pelvic floor muscles, and it wraps around the rectum,
Mm-hmm.
that basically relaxes. So your rectum straightens. There's no
Mhm.
more kink in your rectum, and it allows for better poop dynamics, and you poop easier. And they've done
Yeah.
studies where they've some really weird studies where they got people to poop off like different platforms and like shelves and like wearing
Yeah, it's
heels
like
and
college
stuff.
students.
Yeah, I don't know how much they got paid, if they got paid, but they basically found that the more you adopted that squatting position,
Yeah.
the total time it took for you to defecate and the quality of the poop and the amount of straining was all improved
Wow.
if you kind of like were adopting that squat position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not suggesting someone climbs onto the rim of their toilet and like, poops like that. It's a sort of
Yeah.
safety hazard, but you can raise your knees so it comes above your hips with either a poop stool that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you can buy cheap
Yeah.
online, or you can roll up and like an old towel and rest your feet on that towel,
Yeah.
or you can even lean forwards on the tips of your toes.
Yeah.
That also simulates your knees going
Squatting.
above your hips, and that's
Yeah.
kind of squat type position. So that's like the anatomy side of things. Time on toilets, you also need to try to minimize that.
Mm.
If it's not coming after 5-10 minutes, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So just go and do something else
Yeah.
and then come back. An important thing is to listen to your bowels. And what I mean by that is when you get the urge, go.
Right.
Don't ignore that. And then, because what happens is like the poop can be sucked back in.
Yeah.
You get this sort of retropulsion of like the stool
Yeah.
back up into the colon a little bit.
Yeah.
So, it's key to listen to that urge because that's your body telling you like it's time and we need to keep to this kind of schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And, on that point around the schedule, we have this circadian clock, obviously, that
Right.
that determines more than just our sleep habits. It determines even our pooping habits because we've got little circadian clocks in our gut
Yeah.
as well.
In every organ.
In every
Yeah.
single cell in the body, you've got
Mhm.
the clock. So your bowels are also slaves to the circadian clock. our body loves routine and it loves to keep a schedule and timing. So, most people, once they get into a schedule, they will have a pooping window every single day. You should try to stick to that pooping window if you can.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, like the other important things, like external things, fiber, hydration.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, group of things are all the bits of the formula you need to have the best poop in the world.
That's wonderful. I think that's great. I think that's something that doctors don't talk enough about with their patients.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. So, well, do you want to tell us how we can get in touch with you, how our audience can follow you, how they can I think you have a book, they can read your book, follow you for your new product, all the exciting things that you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find me pretty much everywhere, Instagram and beyond, at Dr. Karan Rajan. And my new product, Loam Science, it's got its own Instagram account, Loam Science as well.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
To learn more, follow Dr. Karan Rajan on Instagram and YouTube for science-based health insights. If you're ready to go deeper, Vibrant Wellness offers advanced microbiome testing through our Gut Zoomer, a comprehensive look at bacteria, fungi, and markers that shape your health. Visit vibrantwellness.com to learn more or find a provider near you. Follow us on Instagram at Vibrant Labs, and make sure to like and subscribe to the Vibrant Wellness podcast for more conversations on the science of living well.